how the European Union works. Welcome! In this video, we are going to make the European Union easier to understand, especially for young people living in rural communities. For many people, the EU can feel distant, technical, or difficult to follow. Decisions seem to happen somewhere far away, using formal language and complicated procedures. But the truth is that EU policies affect everyday life in many direct ways. They shape opportunities for education and training, they influence agriculture and rural development, they support digitalisation, environmental action, infrastructure, youth programs, and regional investment. So this video has a simple goal: to show that the European Union is not just a distant set of institutions. It is also a political space that influences local life and that young people can engage with, understand, and help shape. Let's start with the most basic question. What is the European Union and why does it exist? The European Union is a union of 27 European countries that work together in many policy areas. It grew gradually after the Second World War, when European leaders wanted to reduce conflict, strengthen cooperation, and build a more stable future. Over time, that cooperation expanded into many areas of economic, social, and political life. According to the EU's official aims and values, the Union works to promote peace, its values, and the well-being of its people. It is built on ideas such as human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. That may sound formal, so let's translate it into plain language. The EU exists because some challenges are too connected, too large, or too cross-border to be solved effectively by countries acting alone. Issues like trade, climate policy, digital standards, migration, environmental protection, food systems, and consumer rules often require countries to cooperate. The EU gives them a common framework to do that. For rural youth, the important thing to understand is that the EU is not only about major capitals and big international meetings. It also shapes the conditions of life in villages, small towns, and regions through policies, budgets, and programs that influence opportunities on the ground. Now, let's look at the main institutions that make the EU work in practice. The first key institution is the European Parliament. Parliament represents EU citizens. Its members, called Members of the European Parliament or MEPs, are directly elected. That makes Parliament the EU's only directly elected institution. Parliament debates laws, proposes changes, adopts legislation together with the Council, approves the EU budget together with the Council, and supervises the work of the European Commission. The second key institution is the European Commission. The Commission is the EU's main executive body. It proposes new laws and policies, manages the EU budget, monitors whether EU law is correctly applied in member states, and helps shape the Union's overall strategy. A simple way to remember this is that the Commission usually starts the lawmaking process by putting forward proposals. The third key institution is the Council of the European Union. This is where ministers from all EU countries meet. The ministers who attend depend on the topic. For example, agriculture ministers meet when agriculture is discussed, and education ministers meet when education is on the agenda. The Council negotiates and adopts EU laws together with Parliament, and it also coordinates policy positions among governments. If you want a quick summary, it works like this. Parliament represents people, the Council represents governments, and the Commission proposes and manages. That is the basic triangle at the heart of most EU decision-making. So, how does the EU actually make laws and policies? In many areas, it uses what is called the ordinary legislative procedure. Do not let the name scare you. The logic is easier than it sounds. Usually, the process begins with the European Commission. The Commission identifies a policy issue, gathers evidence, consults experts and stakeholders, and may open public consultations so that citizens, organizations, and professionals can comment on a future proposal. Then, the Commission drafts a legislative proposal. That proposal is sent to the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. Both institutions examine it. They debate it, suggest amendments, negotiate with one another, and work toward an agreed version. In the ordinary legislative procedure, Parliament and the Council are equal co-legislators. That means both must agree on the text for a law to be adopted. After that, implementation matters. Depending on the type of legal act, EU rules may apply directly, or member states may need to adapt their national laws. So, EU policymaking is not only about drafting and voting. It also includes how rules are put into practice across countries, regions, and local communities. Let's bring this down to earth with examples that matter in rural areas. One of the most visible examples is the Common Agricultural Policy, often called the CAP. The CAP is one of the European Union's major policies, and part of its funding supports rural development through the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development. This support is not only about farming in a narrow sense. It also connects to environmental management, rural economies, local communities, and long-term territorial balance. Why does that matter for young people? Because rural development shapes the future of where they live. It can influence local services, entrepreneurship, training, local infrastructure, innovation, environmental resilience, and the attractiveness of rural areas as places to live and work. Another important concept is LEADER, a bottom-up approach to rural development. Instead of assuming that solutions should always come from the top, LEADER gives local actors a role in shaping priorities and projects in their own territories. That idea matters a lot in youth work, because it matches the principle that communities should help design their own future. Beyond agriculture and rural development, other EU policies also affect rural life. Digital and regional policies can support connectivity and broadband access. Education and youth policies influence mobility, learning, and participation opportunities. Climate and environmental policies influence land use, biodiversity, energy choices, and adaptation strategies. So, even when a policy is not labeled as a rural policy, it may still shape rural realities in very practical ways. Now, let's focus on the role of young people. A common misunderstanding is that the EU only makes policies for young people. In reality, it also creates channels through which young people can influence policy. One important mechanism is the EU Youth Dialogue. This is part of the EU Youth Strategy. It creates a structured dialogue between young people and decision-makers. Through discussions, consultations, and national and European processes, young people can express priorities and contribute to the policy conversation. Another important tool is the European Citizens' Initiative. This is a formal participatory mechanism that allows EU citizens to ask the European Commission to consider proposing new legislation. To move forward, an initiative must collect at least 1 million signatures, with minimum thresholds reached in at least 7 EU countries. It is not an easy tool, but it is a powerful example of how participation can work at European level. There are also public consultations run by the European Commission. Through these, citizens, organizations, and other stakeholders can comment on planned laws and policy initiatives. This matters because policymaking does not happen in a vacuum. Institutions often seek feedback before decisions are finalized. Young people can also participate through youth councils, NGOs, student groups, rural associations, European youth events, advocacy campaigns, and direct contact with elected representatives. Members of the European Parliament, for example, are elected to represent citizens, and that includes younger generations. At this point, a practical question appears. How can rural youth actually influence EU legislation and policies? The first answer is by understanding local problems in policy terms. For example, if a rural community faces weak public transport, poor internet access, limited youth spaces, or a lack of training opportunities, those are not only local frustrations. They can also be framed as policy issues linked to inclusion, mobility, digital access, regional development, or youth participation. The second answer is to organize. Individual voices matter, but organized voices are often stronger. Youth organizations, community groups, and informal youth networks can collect experiences, prepare recommendations, build partnerships, and bring those messages into wider processes. That is especially important in rural areas, where people may feel less visible in national or European debates. The third answer is to use existing channels. Young people can participate in youth dialogue processes, contribute to consultations, follow EU policy agendas, contact MEPs, work with NGOs, join campaigns, or support broader participatory tools like citizens' initiatives. The fourth answer is to connect local evidence with wider policy discussions. When young people can say, "This is the problem in our village, this is how it affects us, and this is what needs to change," they are already speaking the language of public policy. So influence does not begin in a large institution. It usually begins with clarity, organization, and persistence at local level. Let's imagine a simple example. Suppose a group of young people in a rural area notice that many teenagers leave the village because they feel isolated, disconnected, and excluded from opportunities. The group starts by documenting the problem. They talk with other young people. They gather examples. They identify the main barriers: weak transport, lack of cultural spaces, poor connectivity, and limited participation in local decision-making. Next, they work with a youth organization or local NGO. Together, they turn these concerns into a structured message. They connect the issue to wider EU priorities, such as inclusion, youth participation, territorial cohesion, or digital access. They might bring these ideas into a youth consultation, present them in a local policy meeting, connect with a national youth platform, or raise them with elected representatives. This example shows something important. Policy influence is not magic. It is a process of making local reality visible, understandable, and actionable. And that is something rural youth are fully capable of doing. So, what should be the main takeaway from this video? First, the European Union is easier to understand when you focus on its core roles. The Commission usually proposes. The Parliament and the Council usually decide together. Member states then help implement what has been agreed. Second, EU policies matter in rural life more than many people realize. They can shape development opportunities, services, agriculture, education, digital access, environmental action, and youth participation. Third, young people are not outside the system. They are part of it. They can question it, respond to it, and influence it. Sometimes that happens through formal channels, like consultations or the EU Youth Dialogue. Sometimes it happens through civil society, public campaigns, or organized local action. And finally, democracy becomes stronger when people who are often seen as distant from decision-making realize that their voice matters. Rural youth do not need to wait to be invited into the future. They can help define it. The European Union may seem complex, but at its core, it is a system where countries work together to make decisions that affect everyday life. Institutions like the European Commission, the Parliament, and the Council shape policies that influence education, rural development, environment, and opportunities for young people. These decisions are not distant. They shape your village, your region, and your future. From funding for local projects to support for youth mobility, agriculture, digital access, and community development, the European Union is present in many aspects of daily life, even if we do not always see it. And most importantly, the European Union is not only something that acts for you, it is something you can be part of. Your ideas, your challenges, and your voice can connect to wider European priorities. What starts locally can grow into something much bigger. For young people in rural areas, this matters even more. You are close to real needs, real people, and real challenges. That gives you a unique perspective. You do not need to leave your community to create change. You can start exactly where you are. Opportunities exist. Programs like Erasmus+, Serve, Creative Europe, Urbact, and many others are designed to support ideas like yours. They are not only for big cities or experts, they are for people ready to take initiative. You can create a project, connect with others, travel, learn new skills, or improve your local environment. What may seem like a small idea can become a real initiative, supported and recognized at European level. Do not underestimate your role. Rural youth are not too far, too small, or too late. In many cases, rural communities are where the most meaningful and visible changes can happen, because every action has a real impact on people's lives. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay active. Follow opportunities, connect with others, and take the first step when the moment comes. The European Union offers tools, but the change depends on you. Your ideas, your energy, and your courage can shape the future of your community.
We hope that you have enjoyed this module. But before we finish, let's check if you remembered some important things. Take 2 minutes and answer on these questions. 1. Why was the European Union created? A. To promote peace, cooperation, shared values, and the well-being of people in Europe. B. To replace all local and national governments. C. To manage only farming policy in Europe. D. To create one single language for all European countries. Think. The correct answer is A, to promote peace, cooperation, shared values, and the well-being of people in Europe. Let's now check another question. Which statement correctly describes the roles of the main EU institutions? A, the Parliament represents governments, the Commission represents citizens, and the Council manages only culture policy. B, the Parliament represents citizens, the Commission proposes laws, and the Council represents member state governments. C, the Commission elects citizens, the Council writes all laws alone, and Parliament only observes. D, the Council represents NGOs, the Parliament manages the EU budget alone, and the Commission has no legislative role. What do you think? The correct answer is B. The Parliament represents citizens, the Commission proposes laws, and the Council represents member state governments. And one more. How are EU laws usually created in practice? A, the Commission proposes a law, and then the Parliament and the Council examine, amend, and adopt it together. B, the Parliament proposes all laws, and the Commission only translates them. C, each member state writes one sentence of the law and sends it directly to villages. D, the Council decides everything alone without any proposal. Think carefully here. The correct answer is A. The Commission proposes a law, and then the Parliament and the Council examine, amend, and adopt it together. And let's finish with our last question. How can young people in rural areas influence EU policies? A, only by moving to Brussels permanently. B, only by voting once every 10 years. C, by using youth organizations, consultations, the EU Youth Dialogue, campaigns, and contact with elected representatives. D, they cannot influence EU policies at all. Yes, the correct answer is C, by using youth organizations, consultations, the EU Youth Dialogue, campaigns, and contact with elected representatives. We hope that you have enjoyed this module and that you are now ready for some action. Good luck!